Welcome to this video on configure Azure Data Lake Storage with PowerBI dataflow. As you might know, dataflow is new in PowerBI and it allows you to perform ETL, extract, transform, load workloads in the cloud directly in PowerBI. By default, you get with PowerBI Pro 10 GB of storage, and if you have PowerBI Premium, you get 100 TB of storage. So you may ask why it is a good idea to use your own storage account. Well, if you use the storage provided by PowerBI, it is isolated. This means you don't have access to the storage like using Azure storage accounts, but it is managed by PowerBI. So one way to deal with this and then what is supported is to bring your own storage account, and we will have a look how you can configure this within PowerBI. So the first thing what we need to do is to create a new storage account, and here are some things to mention. In the documentation, it is said you have to create this storage account with all the same tenant and the same region. So when we go to Azure, my tenant here is ERP Coder. You see this in the domain and directory. And when we go back to Power BI, to info, you see here with this URL. Let's open it. The tenant ID. So you want to compare the tenant ID. For example, my tenant here ends with this GUID 8F9. And looking here, as you see it by the directory, it ends with 8F9. So we are here in the same directory. So this means you cannot create a storage account in one company and provide it to another company using Power BI, but this has to be created within the same tenant. The second thing to mention here is that we have to look where Power BI is located, and in my case it's in North Europe. So we have to create a storage account within the same region, so we have to create in this case a storage account in North Europe. So let's switch back to Azure, and let's say we want to create a new resource. Go to storage and storage account. I give it here for the resource group a new name. I call it Power BI. I create a new one, Power BI. And the storage account name, I call it Power BI. Bring your own storage account. So here's the first important thing. We have to place the storage account here in North Europe. Performance, we can leave it here to standard. Storage account type is V2, and read access geo-redundant is okay. There's one important step on the next side. That's called hierarchical namespaces. We have to enable this here. Let's create the storage account. This can take a few seconds. And finally, The storage account has been created, so let's go to our resource. And the first thing we need to do here is to grant Power BI access to the storage account. So we go here to access control, add a new role assignment, and we want to use the reader role here and look up the Power BI service. And this will assign read access to the storage account for the Power BI service. In the documentation, it is said it takes up to 30 minutes. Therefore, we will make a short break, have a coffee, and come back after 30 minutes. Welcome back. Some minutes have passed. There should be enough time to synchronize the RBAC rule. And the next thing we need to do is to create the blob container, which will be the base for the Power BI dataflow. So let's have a look here in the Azure portal. We have a resource group called Power BI, and this resource group contains a storage account, Power BI being on storage account. So in order to access this, we need the Azure Storage Explorer, and here is already a web-based Explorer in preview, but we're going to use the Windows tool. So let's download the Storage Explorer. Here it is. Let's install the Storage Explorer. We accept the license agreement, install. So it is loading up. And the first thing what we need to do is to provide our subscription here. There are already some subscriptions from my existing accounts, and I have used this ERP coder subscription here for the storage account. It requires to re-enter the credentials. In case you have not used the Storage Explorer before, you can add a new account by using this Add an Account button here, and you provide your Azure account here. But we already have now this account setup, and when we go to this account here, it shows us the Power BI bring your own storage account storage. So what we need to do is to create a new blob container. So by right clicking, create a new blob container, and now it is important to name it Power BI. And in the next step, we need to provide some enterprise application access to this Power BI blob container here. This can be done by using this manage access, and we add the object IDs here. So first we have to look up this object IDs in our Azure Active Directory. So let's go back to the Azure portal. We don't need this site here anymore. Go to Azure Active Directory. Go to Enterprise Applications. And one important step here is to switch to all applications and search for Power. Switch here is important, is also documented, because if you only use enterprise applications here, you only get the Power BI service, but we need all this here. So what we need to do is to look up these object IDs here on the right and provide these object IDs for access to the Power BI blob container. So the first thing is Power BI Premium, Service, and Online Query. So let's take this object ID here. No. Copy, paste, and provide access. Read, write, and execute. So next object ID, Power BI Service, copy, paste, read, write, execute, and we are still missing the Power BI query online. Copy, paste, add, and provide read, write, and execute. You can check if these permissions are saved. So Power BI Premium, Power BI Service, and so this is query and this is Power BI and Power BI Premium have read, write, and execute permissions. Okay. After adding Power BI services, there's one additional access that needs to be granted here. That's for the other users, and we need to provide execute permissions only. Next, we want to connect this storage account with our Power BI dataflow. We go back to Power BI Online, go to the settings and to the admin portal. And in the admin portal, there is a setting called dataflow settings and the button connect Azure Data Lake Storage with Power BI. So we need three informations here: the subscription ID, the resource group name, and the storage account name. The subscription ID is available back here in the Azure portal. In my case, this is my subscription I'm using, and this is a subscription ID. And I provide my ID here. Second, the resource group name. I've created a resource group called Power BI. And the storage account name. And in my case, the storage account name is Power BI. Bring your own storage account. And by clicking Next, we are connecting the storage account with Power BI. Allow admin access and click OK. And this should be sufficient. Now let's test our configuration. I'm creating here a new workspace. Call it Power BI dataflow test. And down here under advanced, I'm going to use dataflow storage account, and it tells that data lake storage account generation 2 will be used. So let's create this workspace. And we are right here in this workspace. And we want to create a new data flow. So I'm going to here create a new data flow, new entity. And we have here some default connections that can be used. For this demo, I'm going to use the Odata connection here. And I'm using some Odata demo data here from odata.org. This is a very small set of Odata, and I'm using here the people collection. This looks like this. There are some people with some addresses and so on. So I'm using this address here, copy, go back to Power BI, paste the URL. We don't need a data gateway and we don't need any authentication. Let's say next. Now it's trying to access this URL. This may take a second. Here we see the Power Query editor with also information loaded from the OData feed. I'm going to delete some columns here. We don't need the email columns here. Concurrency, friends, trips, photos, airline, friends. But I'm going to expand the address info. And the city here is also a complex type. I'm going to expand the city. And now we have username, first name, last name, an address, region, city name, a city region, and a gender. So in the next step, I can map this to the common data model entities. So let's say assign. And from the list of entities, I'm using the user. And by default, the Power Query wizard here has already assigned some fields. For example, the first name has been matched. The last name has been matched. And we can enrich this here by also assigning, for example, here's a city name to the city, the country to the country region, for example, the address line to the address here. Let's say OK. Looks good. You can see here these are all the fields from the common data model, but they don't need to be filled. Let's say save and close and call it data user and refresh. Now what it does, it goes to the OData data source, is downloading the information and is mapping it to the CDM entity. Back on our storage account, we will see we get a model file that defines the structure of the data, and we will get the CSV file that contains the information. So let's close this. And it's still working on the refresh. Let's start the Azure Data Explorer. And when we have a look at our account, go to the Power BI connected storage account, to the Blob container called Power BI. We have here a Power BI dataflow test, the Odata user, a model JSON that defines the structure, and from our query we have here the CSV. Let's have a look at this. Let's download it, the desktop, call it demo CSV. Okay. And let's open it with Visual Studio Code. And you see the CSV that has been downloaded and stored at our storage account. In order to make use of the data flow, we need to create a dataset first. So let's start Power BI. And we have here a new extension called Power BI dataflow. And it's connecting to my Power BI service and looking up our flows. And here is a Power BI dataflow Odata user and our query 1. Let's say load. And here is a dataset based on our flow, and we can now use this dataset in our Power BI applications. First name, last name, and the address line 1. Voila. And here it is.